Hi everyone, and welcome to our Inner Circle Featured Photographer webinar. It's really great to see you here. This is Nigel Merrick, and I'm the founder of the Xenolog Photography Business and Marketing website, and of course the new Inner Circle. And today I'm going to be joined by architectural photographer Jeffrey Jacobs, who's built an amazing reputation across the world through his incredible use of light. Part of the process that he calls transforming realities. In fact, Jeffrey will be teaching an incredible workshop in Montana in October, and I'm sure we'll learn more about that as we go, and you'll get to meet him and learn more about him as well. So, as you can see from this little example here, no building or structure is too large or too small for Jeffrey's camera, and I'm very excited to have him here with us today. So, what are we going to cover in our webinar? Well, we'll start with a quick introduction, and then I'll be chatting with Jeffrey for a little while about his business, how he got started, and that kind of thing. Then I'll hand the screen over to Jeffrey so that we can take a detailed look into some of his favorite images to give some insight into how these amazing photographs are created. After that, we'll open it up for questions. So if you have a question, you can enter that into the chat box in the control panel on your screen, and I see that most of you have found that already. And that will raise your virtual hand, as it were, and we'll try to answer as many of those as we can at the end. So let me go and unmute Jeffrey's line so that he can actually talk to us. Actually, I think, Jeffrey, I think your line is already open, isn't it? Okay, Jeffrey, I'm having a hard time. I'm not hearing you.
How's that? Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Did you have your microphone muted?
Well, no, I didn't, but it didn't. It went to the default thing instead of it to my headset, so I just realized I had to change it again.
Oh, that's okay. Well, listen, it's really great to have you here. This is the second time that we've done something like this, although this is the first time that we've actually done a true webinar where people will be able to see your images. And so why don't we kind of set the scene a little bit so that people can get a sort of an idea of who you are and sort of where you are as a photographer. So can you kind of give a little background about how you got started and what made you choose architecture as your sort of favorite genre, as it were?
Well, if you've ever seen my handwriting, it's pretty obvious why I wasn't an illustrator. But photography was my medium. I knew I wanted to do something in the arts. I even tried my hand at writing, but that didn't last long. So I actually went to art school in Atlanta, and I had an assignment. My first quarter in school, first semester in school, and it was to shoot a complete portfolio of one subject, and I had 2 weeks to pick my subject, and I had to have at least, I believe it was 10 or 12 images by the end of the semester. If you've ever had an assignment like that or assigned yourself something like that, it's kind of daunting because there's so many subjects out there that one can photograph. I was actually leaning towards photojournalism, and I was going to school in Atlanta. And late in the afternoon, at the optimum time of day, I had a wide-angle lens, and I looked up at Colony Square, and I literally tingled from head to toe. And wow. I've been pursuing that tingle ever since. In fact, so much so that I want to share that with everyone else. So I try to make images that make people tingle with appreciation for the subject, not necessarily the photograph.
Right, and I think we can safely say that that is in fact the case, because when I look at your images, I see a kind of a life being brought out of the subject that is really quite remarkable for something that is so inanimate, and it really does make you kind of stop and give you that sort of like tingle down your spine when you look at it and you think, oh my gosh, the beauty of this building. and this structure and the way that it's lit and the care and attention that's been put into every detail of creating that photograph. But I'm sure that back in the early days when you were starting out and you had that initial kind of push, if you like, to want to pursue this, that you had to spend time to nurture and develop your style and kind of find your place, as it were. How difficult a process was that?
Well, actually, I after that initial tingle, I mean, it didn't require a lot of effort at the time. I just happened to kind of stumble across it. I thought it was easy. I thought photographing architecture was easy until I continued to try to create that tingle, and it just wasn't happening. I love architecture. I don't know why, but I do. Ever since I was a kid, we traveled and always drove through major cities like New York and Philadelphia, and my nose would be smashed up against the window trying to drink in as many buildings as I possibly could. I didn't understand why at the time, but of course now I do. But you mentioned details. Well, architecture, even the smallest structures are comprised of millions of details,
mm-hmm.
and it's all those details are all thought out and all put together to create the whole. And that's
right.
kind of how I pursue my work. Is I'm very focused on all the details within the subject, and I try to bring each one of them out to the point where when you build it all together, you can't help but see it. So I want people to appreciate all those details. And
right.
Photography is a two-dimensional medium.
Mm-hmm.
And so no matter what subject we shoot, even a piece of paper, it's three-dimensional. And
absolutely.
Our job is not just to show what was in front of the camera, but to make people appreciate what you see. Either show it the way you see it, or at least appreciate the subject enough to try to create a true experience of it.
Yeah.
By going for that, trying to create a three-dimensional scenario, a three-dimensional experience.
Right, and we're going back to what you said about the details. It reminded me of something that Peter Jackson, the director of the Lord of the Rings movies, and of course the forthcoming Hobbit movies, and he said very much the same thing. Was that when he was trying to create that whole world of Middle Earth for the Lord of the Rings films, he focused on every tiny little detail, even down to every button that was on uniforms or costumes were almost individual, and that of course no one would ever notice a single button in a huge scene, but all of the sum of all those tiny little parts all came together to produce something that seemed extremely realistic and extremely detailed.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. I can't tell you. I mean, I've even had, clients, and I'm, all the way to the end of this hall, just farthest point away from the camera, and I'm addressing that hallway and lighting the hallway, and the client says, "Oh, well, that's not going to matter." I said, "Well, do we want to see it? I mean, is it important that we see this?" He said, "Oh, yeah, but it's so far away, no one will ever see it." I said, "They won't unless I show it to them."
Right.
And that's the idea, is you draw the viewer through your scene. And light and composition are the two key ingredients to any photograph, regardless of the subject.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely, and I'm sure we can talk about some of those aspects of the composition and the lighting and so on when we come to seeing some of your photographs in detail. But as a specialized niche, I would expect that marketing in this particular arena would be quite challenging too. And what are some of the things that you found that works best for you, and to get your message out for this type of work, and maybe some tactics that you've tried in the past that maybe just didn't work out as well or were not as effective?
Well, I think the primary marketing tool for any visual artist is the work that they produce. Bottom line, it's the work that you produce. It's too easy to make an excuse to do average or poor work because you weren't being paid for it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sometimes you have to invest in yourself in order for other people to invest in you. So every image that you produce is your brand. And,
Right.
and I promise you, your least successful images are going to be the ones that most people will see. So if you don't produce any, then you're covered. Word of mouth is huge, and that's you ask anyone in business, and they will tell you word of mouth advertising is so good you can't buy it.
Yes.
So that's where doing good work, that's what it gets you.
Mm-hmm.
Is word of mouth. I mean, as far as other marketing techniques, I mean, everybody knows the world is changing. The old days of making phone calls and sending samples out to people really isn't enough, but it's still important to do, although I'm not real good about the phone call thing personally, but that's no excuse. It's just a fact. But so I do a lot of emails, one a month. I see projects that in magazines, newspapers, on the news, etc., that's coming up, and so I make efforts to contact the designers, and you can there's all sorts of companies out there where you can buy lists. I've been with AdBase/Agency Access for years. And now they've merged, so it's ultimately going to all be Agency Access.
Mm-hmm.
There again, word of mouth, phone calls, being here and there, and getting your work out there, and only good work.
Right.
That's the big key.
Yeah, and I think another key too is matching your marketing to your market, and by that I mean that I see a lot of photographers who seem to concentrate a lot of their time on social media that's not really appropriate to their particular target market. They may be spending a lot of time trying to build a Facebook photography page when their clients, especially if they're sort of high-end architects or commercial clients, are not interested in that arena. They're not there. They're not present. LinkedIn may be a better place for them to try to build social networks with those people, and of course, the professional networks, and the same goes with, I think, photographers who are targeting moms and that kind of thing would be better suited to maybe marketing on Facebook or Pinterest and that kind of thing. So I think there's a temptation in this day and age, especially with technology being the way it is, for photographers to feel as though they have to jump onto every bandwagon that's passing and spreading themselves very thin, spreading their efforts really thin, and then, of course, the effectiveness of their methods is being reduced somewhat as well. So, for example, I mean, I think you do have a Facebook presence, but you're not particularly active on it because I guess your clients are just not there. They're not in that space.
No, I do have a Facebook presence. I think I think pretty much most people and businesses should to some degree, but my Facebook presence primarily for photographers and photographer colleagues and friends,
Right.
More so than LinkedIn. I actually have very few photographer connections on LinkedIn because that's more or less my business network for clients. But Facebook is more my presence for and connection to photographers. But it is important to have some kind of presence. But people that's going to call me, I don't imagine I'm going to get anybody from Facebook, an architect, a high-end designer, an ad agency. I don't think they're going to contact me through Facebook. They may ultimately friend me on Facebook, probably after we, start a working relationship. But I don't think they're going to find me there, although they will find me through LinkedIn.
Right, and after, of course, after we find clients, after we have prospects that come to us and hire you, as their photographer, then of course the next big sort of hot topic on most people's minds these days, of course, is pricing. And there seems to have been a lot of there seems to be a lot of turmoil with pricing. Certainly over the last few years, or it's just become more noticeable these days, I suppose. But how has this changed for you, especially in recent times, in reaction to perhaps the recession? And is it possible to still, charge fees that are appropriate for what we do?
To answer your first question, it hurts. To answer the second question, yes. But we all have to be creative, and a lot of how I have always made my living is on the licensing of the imagery, and I protect that. It's important. So there are ways. It's a good way to be able to negotiate. In other words, if you want $5,000 fee and the client has $3,500, well, then do you really need these specific uses? Well, no, we're just getting them because it's easy. Well, then if you don't really need billboards in China, then let's restrict that. Let's take that out of the mix. And then which will reduce the overall cost of the fee of the image or images.
Right.
So there is still that, and that's what I do. My fee structure has always fluctuated with the weather. Okay. I mean, my standards are always the same, but the fee structure for me fluctuates based on the client, based on the project. If I'm doing something for a designer and say it has Marvin Windows, and I have a relationship with Marvin Windows, so I will work with that client to get that job, get access to that subject, and I'll even sometimes I'll invest out of my fee to produce a higher end image, because I'm pretty sure, because I know this client likes my work, then this is a really nice project. Chances are I'm going to license that image,
right,
and make as much or more or 10 times more than what I made photographing it for the architect.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was going to say that you just mentioned there is something that we talked a little bit about in our last call, and where your business model is perhaps a little unusual in that you do have this idea of repurposing your photographs through licensing to clients other than the original architect. And I'm sorry, I didn't really mean to interrupt you, but I just wanted to bring that point out.
No, that's fine. That's exactly right. It also motivates you to take your images farther. If you think the stronger and the more powerful the image, the more valuable it is, the more unique, the more how it will differentiate either a product or a brand. It becomes much more valuable than what you can get if you just swing by the building during lunchtime and take a few pictures. Okay,
Yep.
and it draws people's attention. There's been some studies lately that and it's proven that people stay on websites with more impactful images longer.
Right.
So that, of course, that's what people want. They want to draw you in, and that's what powerful imagery does. So when you create that, then it has a lot more value to it on its own than, say, you go around and shoot 15, 20 pictures in the same amount of time or more.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't in the same amount of time as it took to do the one.
Right.
Well, the truth of the matter is that just about anybody could run around and take those same pictures given the same parameters, which there again, it dilutes the uniqueness of the image. But if you create images that no one can go and stand in the same spot and do the same thing and get the same thing, then you have great value. That elevates the value as well as your product.
Absolutely, and I think, as well, this reminds me of a conversation we had the other week when we were chatting on the phone, where you mentioned something very interesting, which was to do with the idea that so many photographers are kind of, I don't know what the word is, but they want to attack any project, by producing as many photographs as they can grab. The fact that digital now is free, basically, film is free now, so they can go out there and they can shoot as many images as they like, whereas you're still in the sort of the old school way, and I really don't like to use that term with it, because I still
like it either, Nigel.
I'm sorry. It was making no reference to your age or anything like that, I promise. But it's still that idea that we need to create a photograph, and it isn't just a case of, well, let's just go machine gun the whole subject in the hope that out of our 15,000 photographs, that if one of them might come out, or maybe if we Photoshop 3 or 4 of them together, that we can create some kind of monster hybrid out of them. You actually spend the time to create maybe a small number of images that that the client is truly going to fall in love with and appreciate and want to be proud to own, in fact.
Absolutely. Now, I mean, going around and shooting a whole bunch of pictures, I've said this, been saying it for years, a blind hog can find an acorn every now and then. So, but if you make your own acorns, no, that's what photography, I go around, that's my scouting process. I think I scout a project pretty much like too many photographers actually produce the assignment.
Yeah.
And so we go and we find all these views. Oh, wouldn't this be cool? This might be nice, and this is really interesting, or this is important to the story and how the design goes together. And when we're shooting architecture, we're not just taking a picture of a building. I mean, groups of people spent a lot of time creating this image or creating this structure, be it interior, exterior, or the entire project. So, and they had a premise behind it. They had a story they were saying. So it's important, first and foremost, for an architectural photographer to understand that story. And know how best to tell that story. So I'll go over and shoot all the pertinent things to what I think that story is. It doesn't matter to me what time of day it is. I'm looking for viewpoint only, and then we'll sit down between the designer or the marketing person or whoever, the group of people making those decisions, and we'll pick 4 or 5 or 10, depending on the size of the project, to the images that tell that story. All right. Now, I do not understand why people go and want 40 or 50 pictures of a structure, no matter how expansive it is almost, because they'll never show those photographs. They're going to show 4 or 5 or 10 if it's a substantial project to tell the story.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of going and shooting the assignment and editing afterwards, I go and cover the assignment and edit before we shoot it. And that way we put everything we have into creating the best 5, 4, 10, 3, 1 image that tells the story of that structure and that will draw people to that structure.
Yeah.
So, you know, and a lot of the people, they'll ask for 40 or 50 and because they know they're only going to pick 10. But
right.
I think, excuse me, a lot of my clients know the difference and knows someone that actually knows what they're doing is going to discourage shooting 40 or 50 pictures.
Right.
Okay, but someone that doesn't really know or is into the, you know, I get a nickel for every picture I take, then they're into shooting 100 or 50 or 100 or 150. Because they're going to make more money the more pictures they shoot. It's not going to be, they're not creating value. They're just, you know, creating widgets.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, you know, with the way that you light your subjects, and you know, we can talk more about how you set up the lighting when we take a look at your photographs in a moment. But, you know, suffice to say that there's a tremendous amount of work that goes into where you position the lights, how many lights you have, how long it takes, and all that kind of thing. So you really can't just say to yourself, well, you know, I'm just going to go and shoot 100 photos of this building. You would be there for a year or two doing it like that, you know.
Oh my gosh, yeah, no. And that's all part of going and scouting it and planning what you want to do and knowing what tells the story of the subject, regardless if it's architecture or people or food or whatever it might be. I mean, our job is to tell the story of that subject.
Yeah.
To elevate the subject for everyone to enjoy.
Yeah, and I think, you know, this is where the real passion that we have for our subjects really comes into play, because I don't think it's really, I suppose it is possible to do it if you don't really enjoy the subject, but it's certainly going to be a lot harder. I think, you know, if you have a true passion for whatever it is that you're photographing, whether it be brides or buildings or food or fish or whatever it happens to be, if you have a real love for it and a real passion for it, that, I think, somehow opens up that window into your soul almost, that allows you to connect with it in such a way that you can bring out the very best in it, and you kind of get lost in that zone.
Exactly, and that's when good enough just isn't good enough.
Right.
You know, it's not gonna. It's gonna. You know, you're not going to be nearly as satisfied if you rush through it just to get another picture, because you're missing an opportunity that you'll never get back again. So work out all the stuff, all those views beforehand, and go and make the best of the views that tell the best story.
Right.
And you know, you can charge a whole lot more for that.
Yeah.
You know, you really can.
Yeah, well, you know, you charge appropriate to the value that the image has for whoever it is that you're creating it for. You know, I mean, if you're creating it something for an architect who is wanting to not only just keep a record of whatever it is that they've designed and conceptualized and brought to fruition, you're actually helping them to create a portfolio for themselves that they can then present to their clients to say, look, this is the vision that I bring to my work. This is the life that I bring to the buildings that we create, and this is the spirit in which we work. And this is the difference that I see in your photography compared to, maybe somebody who just goes out with their one digital camera and a lens and just kind of just machine guns the whole thing, because they're missing out on capturing the essence of their subject, and so the photography that you create goes a lot further and has a lot more impact and effect than just the photograph itself. It helps that architect to get more business and become more successful and create more buildings, and helps to propagate what they're doing. So of course it's worth, it has a high value and it's worth a lot more.
I mean, absolutely. This is a design firm's legacy. Okay, this is their work. This is how their work will be remembered, not just a couple of years from now, but 100 years from now.
Right.
And it's also it's a very historic subject matter. It's the most historically significant subject anyone can design, build, or interpret, and few people really can debate that.
Right.
So it's really important.
Yeah.
And it's a pain. It's a lot of work, even today.
Yeah.
Back in the film days, people would run. I can't tell you how many referrals I got from photographers, where people call and say they want, serious architectural photography, and they say, oh, well, then no, you call Jeffrey. Because I don't want to do that. And I'll do that if someone asks me to shoot jewelry, okay? Because, I mean, it's just not my thing. I have a great admiration and respect for jewelry photographers,
right,
even in the digital world. But my mentor loved photographing jewelry. But, oh, my God, no, that's not and some people, they felt the same way about architecture because of all the technical aspects.
Yeah, quite.
I mean, some of those bars, some of those barriers have been lowered now because of digital. But they're not gone. And I still have a great deal of respect for. There's a technical aesthetic to both architecture and photography.
Right.
And I'm, old school, new school, no matter what school, I'm all about creating that level of image. And nowadays, it's even more unique.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I just have a couple more questions before we hand over and get to see some of your beautiful work in action. And I think, did you tell me earlier on that you had a couple of kind of before and after images? The sort of this is what the normal eye would see, and this is how you would photograph it.
I do. I have
awesome.
Some scout to finish, and actually most of them are actually a number of them are actually scout shots.
Awesome.
That we decided, and then we went back and created the image.
Right. Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing those.
I don't want anybody to get bored here.
If anyone is bored, then just let us know. But I haven't. So far, all I'm getting is good comments coming through in the questions box right now. So this is awesome stuff. One question that I have is, how would you describe the relationship between architects and architectural photographers these days compared to, say, 10 or 20 years ago? I mean, have things changed very much in that regard, that kind of working relationship?
Yes, I think so. Yes and no. Back a number of years ago, I actually worked more with the actual designer. And now the shift is towards marketing people. Okay, they hire people to come in and do their marketing, so they make a lot of the decisions about what is photographed and what isn't, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So, and I mean, I'm actually able to see a project from both perspectives. I definitely understand the artist and how important a lot of these elements are to them. But at the same time, I also understand the need for saleability and being able to. So I mean, I don't mean to sound like I'm patting myself on the back here, but I do have a way to be able to help balance that between to kind of serve both needs, because that's what I want to do too. You know, because I'm all about the art. But I absolutely understand what, you know, what will help sell and what things aren't necessary to shoot to help, you know, I can help them edit so they get a little bit of both.
Yeah, that's really
nice little details, little things that the designer, you know, spent a lot of time bending and changing and all during the process, and finally it all clicks and works, and he gets all tingly inside, and he wants that detail he wants everyone to experience that detail in the same way.
Right. So, you know, so you
the designer, but it may not be something that the marketing people actually can get their head around. So I kind of help bridge that gap and find an avenue where it would work as a saleable thing, as to satisfy both. I'm trying to serve mini masters and make them all happy.
Excellent. So before we move on to the photos, one last question. What advice would you have for somebody who is maybe thinking about moving into the architectural photography business, or is just starting out, or maybe they've been in it for a little while and they're kind of discovering that it's a little bit different to what they might have expected? You know, what should they aim to learn with regard to say the business side of things, and then of course the technical aspects as well?
I think first and foremost they need to work on their work. They need to work on their vision and try to start to understand architecture. Try to understand it from it's your job to tell that story. And then, you know, along with that is to having a real understanding of light and learning patience to either wait for it or learn how to create it when it's not there.
Right.
I think that's first and foremost, because if you do that and you begin and your work will elevate, and people will notice it, and they will call you. You have to get it out there to them, mind you, but your work is what sells. It really is. It's not how many pictures you do in a day. In fact, the fewer you do, the more the client on the other end, any sophisticated client, will know that you know what you're doing.
Yeah. It's a bit like wine, really. Not that I'm a huge wine drinker, but you know, I think I prefer a nice bottle of a good tasting red wine than a 6-pack of something that wasn't.
Back in the film day, I used to tell clients all the time. They say, "Well, aren't you ready yet?" I said, "I expose no film before it's time." Kind of taken from that Gallo wine commercial. I'm showing my age. I was an infant when that was on.
Watching wine commercials as an infant. There's a thought.
Yeah. Well, you know, you dig a hole and you just keep digging.
Oh my goodness me. Okay, so
it's all planning, you know, and that's what we can talk about here if you're ready for me to show.
Absolutely. So, do you have your screen ready? So when I switch to you as the presenter, you'll be able to then share your screen with everybody else. So I think during the transition, I think people will probably just go and they'll see the welcome screen again. So don't go away. We haven't finished. We're